Welcome to EE Grad Preview. We're so excited to have you joining us for the second session. We're going to give it just a minute or two to get some other people just that might be arriving a couple minutes late, and then we will go ahead and get started. For the mentors that are here with us, if you could please go ahead and change your name so that all of the student participants can see that you are a mentor, that would be great. We'll just give it one more minute. Thank you all for joining us. Okay, Sivan, Danielle, you all want to take it away? Go ahead.
Awesome, thank you, Alexis. Hi, welcome back to our Preview Day online series. Today we're going to be addressing the grad school application process and the general timeline for the application cycle. We're also going to dive deeper into exactly how to apply to grad school and what materials you will need for this process. Now, just as a reminder, this is the second session in our series, which will be every Tuesday, 5 to 6:15 p.m. using the same Zoom link that you used to join today.
This series is facilitated by a group of PhD students at UC Davis in the Population Biology program. You'll see them on this call, along with some other grad students and postdocs who might be some of your individual mentors. So hi, I'm Sivan. I'm a rising fifth year, and I'm one of the people who will be leading your session today.
And I'm Danielle. I'm a rising second year, and I will also be one of the people leading sessions today. So this is a 75-minute session, which means we are going to provide you a solid foundation in the topics that we discuss. And all of the facilitators here are peer facilitators, and we are here to help guide your discovery. And we are by no means experts, so ask as many questions as you want, and we are here to help you guide your discovery.
So we'd appreciate if you would keep your video on and stay muted unless you're speaking. And if you have a question or comment during the session, please don't hesitate to type it in the chat. Remember that if you have a question, somebody else probably has that same question. And last, we really hope that you would be respectful and curious. Please keep in mind that everyone is coming in with different experiences and values.
By the end of this session, we hope that you will be able to understand the overall application process and timeline, be better equipped to talk about your specific research interests, and be better able to translate experiences and interests into a competitive application.
And before we dive into all of the material, we want to take a moment to let you know that we're going to be presenting a lot of information today. There are many steps to the application process and a lot of insider information that we want you to know. But that also means that you might not absorb everything in this presentation. So just know that our slides are already online and their notes include everything that we're going to say. So please feel free to open those up now or revisit them later. And please, once again, don't hesitate to reach out to your mentors with any questions that you have.
So our session today will be split into 3 different sections. First, we will talk about the steps to take before the application. Then we'll talk about the application process and timeline in more detail with 2 breakout sessions for Q&A. This section has a lot of information, so we want to give plenty of time for you to be able to clarify things in this part of the talk. And then we will talk about how to talk about your research, and this will include a breakout session to practice your elevator pitches, as we've said in the last session. By no means do these need to be perfect, but we wish to provide a safe space to practice talking about your research. So start thinking of 2 to 3 sentences for that part. So let's jump into the preparing to apply.
Okay, so let's talk about what makes a great applicant so that you can figure out how to make yourself stand out. And since we're focusing on research-based programs, the more important qualities that you want to focus on relate to your ability to conceive and carry out a research project. So one of the primary things, that people look out for is research experience. This shows that you can engage in daily research activities, and it looks better if you've followed through with projects to completion or had more responsibility on these projects. And having publications or presentations does help make clear that you've had this sort of responsibility or you've completed them. And notice that we're focusing on the research process rather than specific research questions. You are rarely expected to have worked on the same research questions that you want to pursue in grad school. And if you're going from a master's to a PhD in a different lab, it may help to have some thematic connection, but in general, people understand that with less funding in master's programs, you can't always choose a project that perfectly fits your interests. And of course, your interests can change. So next, curiosity and interest in research are highly valued because it shows that you're motivated to identify and pursue open research questions. And it's also important to show interest in the program and lab that you're applying to. And this includes knowing why you want to join. People will simply take you more seriously as an applicant if they see that you're more serious about them. Okay. And people will also look for signs of determination and perseverance. For a PhD, that means pushing through when your projects aren't going as planned, teaching yourself new concepts, or trying at something again and again until it works. For example, applying for a research grant multiple times until you finally get awarded some money. And I just said for a PhD, that also means this for a master's too. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the next tier of qualities that people looking at your applications will look for. So first, there's background knowledge in the research area that you're interested in. It's important to have this because it shows you have a strong foundation to build off of in graduate school. And generally, people gain this knowledge through coursework or having some research experience in this area. And research area could be as broad as ecology and evolution or more focused. So if you want to work on some mathematical modeling in grad school, it helps to have taken some math courses or worked with that before. Next, programming and quantitative skills are valued because they demonstrate that you can analyze and interpret data, which you'll be doing a lot of in grad school. And some other things that will help your application are communication skills, the potential to network and collaborate, because a lot of research projects that are especially creative or interdisciplinary is from work between multiple people. And because you'll be working in groups a lot for research, it's really great to have leadership experience and the ability to work in teams. And for these qualities that are listed on this slide, you are not expected to be perfect at them because they're definitely things that you'll get better at in grad school. So now, everything that we've talked about so far is on this slide. And I really just want to highlight that every professor is going to prioritize these qualities differently. So there's not one right fit or formula, though generally you want to be stronger in the green qualities and have some strengths to point to in the yellow and orange qualities. And we also want to point out that there are many different paths to graduate school. So we went over some of these last week. So some people go right out of undergrad to a master's or a PhD. Some people get a master's before they get their PhD, maybe with some time in between each step. Some people gain more research experience by working in a lab for some time. So that would be as a lab manager or a lab technician or some other title. Some people work in jobs that aren't in a lab or don't have to do with science. And there are some people who have bachelor's degrees outside of biology that move to the field of ecology and evolution later, though those people probably have to take more prerequisites and such. So the path that you take is totally up to you, and hopefully this session and future sessions will help you figure out what that's going to be.
Now, one of the most helpful resources for applying to grad school are mentors who will help you through the application process. So this may or may not be a role filled by the person that you are pursuing research with currently. It could be another faculty member, a postdoc, or a graduate student within your lab or a different lab. It is ideal to have a mentor who has similar research interests as yourself, as those mentors can give you a more tailored view of the advice. So these mentors are helpful in a lot of ways. They are great people to give advice on the application process. This can look like providing questions that are necessary to ask during interviews, or sharing programs that they know of and think you might have interest in. They're also great candidates for writing letters of recommendation. So you'll need multiple letter writers for graduate school applications, so it may be strategic to pick a mentor who is not your research advisor to help you through the application process. They are also great people to ask to review application materials such as a personal statement or CV, and they may also have good resources for things like CV formatting, which we will talk about a little later. There are a number of ways that you can find a good mentor for the grad application process. So one way is to look for faculty within your school's biology department. And if you know what you are interested in, you may want to reach out to faculty members who study the topics and systems that you are interested in, kind of like we discussed earlier. Many professors and most professors are enthusiastic when a student wants to pursue research in the field that they are interested in, and would be more than happy to provide mentorship on the application process. I also want to stress that you don't necessarily want to narrow yourself to only faculty for this mentoring position. Postdocs and grad students are also great mentors, and they might have more up-to-date information for the application process. If you have not found a mentor to help you through the application process at your institution, undergrads that belong to minoritized groups can find mentors to help with the application to grad schools and fellowships at eebmentormatch.com, and this will be provided in our resources page on our website. So now let's dive into the actual application process. So first we're going to give some overview for materials that go into the application, and we will walk through the timeline and kind of explain when you should be thinking or working on these materials. And then we will also have 2 Q&A breakout sessions within this section.
All right, so let's start with an overview. What does applying entail? Most of you are probably familiar with the written application, and here I'm just going to list what those contents are, but later on we're going to go in depth in each one. So you'll be asked for a personal statement. Sometimes you'll be asked for a diversity statement, and again we're going to talk about what those are later. Sometimes you're always asked to attach a curriculum vitae, often called CV, which is a little bit different from a resume. You're asked for 3 letters of recommendation. Sometimes you're asked to send scores for the GRE, which is a standardized test for grad school entry. You'll be asked to send your academic transcripts. You'll also be asked to list professors whose labs you're interested in joining. And those professors should be affiliated with the program that you're applying to. Okay, So once you submit your written application, an admissions committee then reviews them and invites top applicants for in-person interviews. And these in-person interviews don't always happen, but they're most commonly done for PhD programs. And the admissions committee is composed of professors who are affiliated with the program you're applying to, and sometimes there's a student representative on the committee as well. So when they're evaluating applications, the reviewers are taking into account how excited a professor is about you joining their lab. And by that, we mean that a professor is telling the admissions committee they'd like you to be invited to the interview or to be offered acceptance into the program. So applicants are almost never invited to an interview or to join the program if that doesn't happen. So also, those professors are most likely not looking through the applications that the admissions committee has. They actually already have a set of students in mind that they're going to recommend. So what's really important that you need to do is make connections with these potential faculty advisors before submitting your application. And those professors need to be the same people that you've listed in your application. So to expand on this a little bit more, generally the more professors that you list in a program, and those are also the professors that you're contacting as well, the less serious you seem about each one, and the less focused your research interests appear. So you should definitely not list more than 3 professors, and only list the professors whose labs you're genuinely interested in joining. Also, a professor that you reach out to might be affiliated with multiple programs. So it helps to touch base with this potential advisor ahead of time to see what programs they take students through and if they have a certain recommendation of where to apply. And sometimes people apply to multiple programs to work in one lab and decide later which program they'll actually join. Okay, so some of you may be wondering who decides which applicants get accepted, and we talked about this a little bit. Let's dive a little deeper. So we just touched on the 2 groups involved, the program's admissions committee and the potential advisors. The program's admissions committee emphasizes program fit more, so they want to see if your general research interests or general research experience in coursework fits with the theme of the program. They also want to be sure that you'd be an active participant in their research community. The potential advisors emphasize lab fit more. So they want to see if your specific research interests fit well with the lab's research program. They want to make sure you'd have the relevant skills or potential to learn the relevant skills to doing research in that lab. And they care if you'd be able to work well with other lab members. So each program differs in how much decision-making power each group gets. But since in most ecology and evolution programs, you commit to an advisor before starting, the potential advisors usually get a very big say. But most importantly, you will not get accepted to a program without a potential advisor saying they want you to join their lab. Okay, so gonna make that super clear again. You need to make connections with potential faculty advisors before submitting your application. Hopefully that's become very clear to you all now. And also, if no professors in a program have shown interest in you, it is not worth submitting that application. And I totally made this mistake when I was applying. I emailed some professors, they didn't really email me back or didn't show interest. And I still submitted the application hoping that maybe like somebody would take note of me, but I never heard back from them. And I lost money that I'll never get back. So please don't make the same mistake.
Now let's talk about the cost of applying. So this was my biggest concern by far when applying to graduate school, as the process can get pretty pricey. So to address this, I'm going to walk us through some of these costs and provide resources for how to minimize it as much as possible. So each application costs anywhere between about $50 to $100 with some variation. Application fee waivers can be program specific, and qualifications differ among universities. So typically, This information can be found on the same page that states all the fees. You usually are required to provide proof of financial need or membership of a pipeline program that promotes service and diversity. If this information is not available online or if it's hard to find, then be sure to reach out to the chair or administrator of the graduate program that you are considering applying to, and they can point you in the direction of some information on application fee waivers. Now, the GRE costs $205 per test in the US, which is a considerable amount. So the company that issues the test, ETS, offers a GRE fee reduction program that requires a 50% test fee payment to apply, and if accepted, test takers receive a fee voucher for the remaining 50% of the cost. The good news is that many programs are increasingly ditching the GRE requirement, and depending on what schools you are applying to, you may not need to take the GRE at all. However, if you do end up planning to apply to schools that require the GRE, be sure to send your scores on test day, since it's $27 per cent score after you leave the testing sites. And you do receive 5 free scores on test day. So be sure to use those. And finally, the in-person interview process can vary anywhere from partially to fully paid for by the program. So the cost varies from program to program. While some programs will fully cover travel, food, and boarding, some will only cover partial, such as partial travel. Another strategy that programs do is reimbursement. So you will be required to purchase maybe travel, and then they will reimburse you after the weekend is done. This can be flexible. And if you have financial needs, then you should totally email the program chair about your situation. Because it is just so flexible. And again, it's worth noting that this is not an exhaustive list, but it is the most common cost across the application process. But for example, another fee that may come up is transcripts. While some, and this is also program specific, while some programs might accept unofficial transcripts that are free, others may require official college transcripts, which may cost money to send out.
All right, so now we're going to walk through different steps of the application process and show roughly when you should take those steps on a timeline. And we're building up to when you submit applications in December. So let's start with identifying potential advisors for graduate school, which people typically do by late September. Okay, so before you start searching for potential advisors, it's good to start by identifying what research topics interest you. And then the most common approach is to read research papers on those topics. So if you enjoyed the paper, you want to find out which labs contributed to it. And generally, the first and last author tend to make greater conceptual contributions, so that's a good place to start. And they usually have a website or a Google Scholar page where you can find out more about them. You can also ask for advice from your advisors, course professors, or TAs, like Danielle has mentioned. They're really excited to do this, and generally the people whose research interests are closer to yours can give you more specific advice about a certain professor or program to look out for. You can also sample a bunch of different research by attending scientific conferences or watching talks that have been posted online. Many conferences have now gone online. Some are free or inexpensive, so it's worth asking your research advisors whether they could help you attend or present at one of them. And conference formats are nice because you have the additional opportunity to connect with members of the labs that you're interested in. Some people like to take a reverse approach, reading about the programs at different institutions and then browsing through each program's faculty. Just take note that programs don't always go by the same name and they differ in scope. For example, population biology spans ecology and evolution, but goes by a different name, while some universities have just a broader biology program. And oftentimes, a big limitation for professors being able to take students on is that they don't have funding for your research or salary. So you can help narrow your search by seeing who has active research grants, meaning they currently have funding, and you can do this online. So two major organizations that fund research are the National Science Foundation and National Institute of Health. And since they're part of the government, you can actually access which professors have received their grants and for which projects. And our resources page does have links to these sites, so you can check that out later. Wow, there's so many ways you can do this. This is the final one. You can find postings for graduate student positions online. So sometimes professors who have funding to take on a student will tweet about it or post it to some websites that we also have links to in our resources. And sometimes you'll see the acronym RA, which stands for Research Assistant. And that's what they call a graduate student who's getting funded by a research grant. And while these avenues definitely show you professors who are interested in taking on students in the next application cycle, they're definitely not the only professors that are interested in doing this. Other professors who haven't posted anything still want students to reach out to them. So not posting does not equal not interested. So hopefully you found some things that can help you out from this slide.
Okay, now we are going to talk about the GRE. So if necessary, you typically want to take the GRE from the summer before the application cycle to October, and usually start sending them out or having them being sent in November or October. But before we start talking about the GRE, I think it's important to take the time to tell you that with much support, the GRE really has no correlation with success in graduate school. We have a few articles in our resource page that highlight the innate bias of the test. And they find that the GRE is better at predicting sex, race, and socioeconomic status than it is predicting academic success. And because of that, many programs are moving away from requiring the GRE, which is a movement called Grexit, and we have a list of programs and schools that have Grexited. But be sure to check all the programs that you are applying to see if they have this GRE requirement. Okay, so now that we've established that the GRE is a bias test, there may be programs that you apply to that do use the GRE. And so we feel that it might be important to hit on a few things about the test and how to approach it. So the test has 3 parts: verbal, and quantitative, and analytical writing. Many practice tests are free, so use these resources. The ETS website outlines the process of taking the test, and due to time, we urge you to look into it there, and we have links provided in the resources page so that you will get the information you need to take the test. So it may be useful to think of the GRE as a bar to get over. And many programs that require the GRE use it differently. And this can vary by program and person on admissions committee. So percentiles are often used more than raw scores. So on the day of the test, it may be hard to tell what a good score is. And a good score may not guarantee you a spot in graduate school. Or I'm sorry, let me phrase that. It will not guarantee a spot in graduate school. For some programs, the GRE may be used as a cutoff, but this is becoming less competitive strategy as programs continue to drop the GRE requirement. So check to see if there are requirements listed on each program website that you are applying to. Programs that do require it often do not use it as an end-all be-all. And speaking from my own experience, my scores were pretty average. They were in the 60th percentile. And it wasn't an issue for me. However, that may not be the case for everyone and for each program. And just reiterating, send those free scores on the day of, no matter what your test was. If you just had a bad day and if for whatever reason you want to take the test again, you can resend all those scores, but just save yourself that little bit of money and use those 5 free test scores day of the test.
Okay, so let's talk about asking for letters of recommendation, which depending on the person that you're asking, you want to maybe do by late November, but we'll tell you later, earlier is better. Okay. So a great letter of recommendation provides examples illustrating the qualities of a person that will translate into their success as a graduate student. For example, they might write, "This person showed great determination in these ways when this happened." They might also favorably compare a person to the general population, so saying that you were an outstanding student in their class. So a good letter writer is a person that you trust to speak highly of you, and it's someone who has knowledge of your work ethic and research interests, and preferably they actually worked with you on a research project. They should also be people that have a good track record of meeting deadlines and responding to emails, because if they miss the deadline and don't submit your letter of recommendation, then unfortunately your application is never going to make it to the admissions committee. So some tips we have are that the earlier you ask for a letter, the more likely they'll write one, because many people are probably asking them. It's also really helpful to send reminders to the letter writers as the deadline approaches. And it does help to give them a spreadsheet or list with all the schools and the dates that they're due, because they have to navigate to different portals to submit the letters, and they only know to do that because they get an email from the program and they might miss those. So totally best to just give them all of the information and help them keep track. And last, it helps to provide your CV or personal statement to letter writers so that they don't forget to include some of your strengths when they're writing.
All right, so speaking of CV, we think it's a good idea to clarify what a CV is and what its function is. So CV stands for curriculum vitae, and it is a comprehensive statement of your educational background, research and teaching experience, and broader impacts. And it is a standard way to present credentials in academia. It is a quick and straightforward way for someone to learn all about you and your research. Now, when writing your CV, you will want to focus on clarity and emphasizing your strengths in organized sections. There are many ways to format CVs, and this can sometimes be a little confusing. So we have provided some example CVs and documents breaking down the different sections, though our guide is inexhaustive, and these can be found on the resource page as well. Some of the formatting guidelines to follow are keeping the writing clean and simple, using caps, bold, italicized, and underlined text for emphasis. You're also going to want to have organized categories, and when describing your research, you want to use succinct phrases and actions, action words such as managed, researched, and conducted.
So let's talk about the content of the CV. First, you write your educational background, and then everything that follows is basically up to you. So some example sections are research experience, publications and presentations, awards, honors, and grants, teaching experience, skills and certifications, outreach, and related work experience. And the resources page online provides a link that gives you more details on what would go in each section and examples from some of the facilitators. Some rules to keep in mind, though, is that you want to order sections by their importance to the position that you're applying to. Generally, people stop paying attention as they go down, so you want the most important things at the top. You want to include only relevant experiences for the position you're applying to, and you typically only list activities after high school. And section titles and content are flexible. So you want to design categories that highlight your strengths and let you list more about yourself. So for example, if I had a bunch of leadership positions in various organizations, I might be looking at these example sections and not really finding a place to put that. So maybe instead of outreach, I'd have a section called leadership and outreach, or leadership and service, where I write down my leadership positions and also perhaps some volunteering activities that I was a part of. All right, so you all just learned a lot. Maybe it was review for some, maybe it was a lot of new content for some. So please just take a few moments to think of or write down some things that might be still confusing to you about the application process. And on the slide, we've listed all the things that we've talked about so far. So just take a moment to think about that. Okay, now we'll head into the breakout rooms where a mentor or facilitator will be present to help clear some of those things up. And please first introduce yourselves, saying what you're up to these days and maybe where you're calling in from. And this breakout room will last 7 minutes, so enjoy.
Sorry, everyone, I was muted, but welcome back. I think we have everyone, or if not everyone, close to everyone. So hopefully any confusion was cleared up. And if not, we will have a second breakout room that will hopefully go over any of the questions you have remaining. So now we're going to talk about how to email potential advisors. So this is something that you, oh, let me go back. I can hit on the timeline a little bit more. This is something if you are applying to the upcoming cycle to start in August and kind of carry through until November. So the most common way to reach out is through a cold email, as Sivan mentioned before. Be sure to review their website and read a few papers to get an idea of what the advisor studies. Now, when you write this email, you are going to want to talk about your interests. So this may look like a few sentences about specific research projects that you are currently working on, and include a few sentences on specific questions and subjects that you're interested in studying in grad school, even if this is somewhat broad. So you want them to have an understanding of the types of perspectives and questions that you would potentially be contributing to their lab. You also want to talk about how you would be a good fit for their lab. So this would include describing 1 to 2 sentences about what their research that you like, and also a few sentences on how you would contribute to the work that this advisor does in their lab. And finally, ask questions. So you want to ask questions about their research. This may give them something to respond back to and increase the likelihood of them, or the probability of them responding. You also want to ask if they are taking grad students in the upcoming application cycle, and you want to follow that by asking if they are available to talk more over video call. This shows your interest in an interview and invites them to continue the conversation with you. So here are a few extra tips for writing this email. First, you want to keep this email short, to the point, and professional. This should be clear and concise, and specify at the front of the email that you are a prospective grad student interested in their lab. And you can do that by including a brief introduction of your name and student or job status, so they know a little bit of background about you. You also want to keep your email to about 1 paragraph in length. Mine definitely was not that long, and you can see that on our resources page. We have a few emails examples for you. So the longer the email, the less likely that this advisor will respond. So you want to keep it concise so that they will not have to take much time to read it. You also want to attach your CV to the email and mention that you have done so. This is an efficient way to relay them your research experiences. And so now that we've discussed what to include in the email, we can discuss who to email and what to expect in terms of responses. So you'll definitely want to cast a wide net and email as many professors as you can find who you would be interested in working with. This will give you some wiggle room in case a large portion of these professors don't respond, which is pretty common. It's not necessarily that they are not accepting students or are not interested in you, but professors typically get a lot of emails, and it's sometimes easy to lose emails from addresses that they do not immediately recognize. Which leads me to my next point. Do not expect to hear back from everyone, and expect that some of the people that you do hear back from will not be able to accept graduate students for the upcoming cycle. This is why you want to keep your options really open. And for the professors who do not respond after about a week or two, you may want to follow up with these professors just in case your emails got lost in their inbox. And now we will talk about chatting with potential advisors. This is usually done after you send an email and you've been corresponding back and forth. So it can really be anytime between August right up until December when you have to submit your applications. So after corresponding over email with the advisors, you may be invited to this interview, which is a two-way interview. Advisors use this to gauge which applicants to invite for an in-person interview, but you should also use this to gauge interest in the advisor and mentoring style. So you definitely want to ask questions on their research to see if it is something that interests you. You also want to talk about yourself. You want to talk more specifically about your research interests and why you're a good fit for their lab. This will be a good way to start making those connections and thinking about the future with them. And remember, this interview is not usually super formal, and the talk should be conversational. So this is used as a good get-to-know-you meeting where you can both learn more about each other and your shared interests. Here you can talk about any projects that they are doing or any announcements they had, such as funding on their websites, or any papers that they've recently published. So before the start of this video or audio call, there's a few things you want to do to prepare. As we've said before, reading the website, again, may be a good refresher of what they study. You might also want to consider reviewing a few of their papers, and also practice talking about your own background and research interests. So now we're going to talk about the personal and diversity statement. So the personal statement is usually about highlighting why you think you would be a great student for the program. And some universities require a diversity statement in addition to the personal statement. Many personal and diversity statements are similar, but you want to be sure to read the requirements for each essay. Today, we are going to use the UC Davis Population Biology Personal Statement and Diversity Statement as a guideline for what is typically asked in these statements. And it can vary a little bit by program to program, but a lot of the times it's on very similar subjects. So first, the UC Davis personal statement wants you to talk about preparation and motivation, which may include academic and research experiences that prepare you for the grad program. They also ask you to talk about interests, specializations, and career goals, which may include research interests, disciplinary subfields, area specializations, and professional objectives. And finally, they ask you about the program fit. So this is where you will describe how you fit into the program by subject matter, and you also want to talk about any research advisors that you are considering working with and want to work with in this section. Okay, and now we can talk about the diversity statement. So in this statement, you should include how you may contribute to the diversity of the grad program and the field that you wish to contribute to. So you can use certain examples of things you've done or what you've overcome to be where you are in this diversity statement, and highlight your individual perspectives that you'll be able to provide. This is also a great place to explain your personal background and, again, how you overcame any hardships and why this is important to you as a graduate student. So now we have gone over all the main parts of the application itself, and we finally arrive at December, which is the time that most applications must be submitted. And it usually is between December 1st through December 15th for that deadline. There may be some exceptions, but most programs have applications due around this time. And for submitting, earlier is not necessarily better, as all applications get reviewed at the same time after the deadline. So holding off longer may be strategic, as you may have a more developed CV and a more developed research project or interest. However, you do want to be sure that you are making the deadline. And again, you want to check each program's application website to see if you qualify for the fee waivers, as this can help kind of with the financial costs of grad school, of applying to grad school.
So now we're going to talk about the in-person interviews that come after submitting your applications if you're invited and if you're applying to a PhD program for sure. And at the same time, so this is from January to March, and around the same time, acceptance letters are sent. So you have your interview and then you hear back from them shortly after, within a few weeks. Oh, Danielle, could you advance the slide? I forgot to get the controls, thank you. You typically travel to the university for a long weekend from Thursday night to Sunday, and you'll most likely stay in a hotel, and that's paid for, or in the home of a graduate student. And one of the days will be dedicated to visiting campus and meeting with faculty in the program. These meetings last around 30 minutes to an hour, and you'll probably meet somewhere around 5 to 8 faculty. You will likely get a schedule ahead of time. And some of these faculty will be the potential advisors that you've listed in your application, and some of these faculty will be on the admissions committee. Aside from this, throughout the weekend, you'll participate in a number of social activities, mostly with graduate students, such as going on hikes with graduate students, or you'd go out to eat with the lab that you're considering joining. Maybe there's a reception with faculty and graduate students, many different things. So some things to keep in mind, is that this might be different with COVID-19. It might all go virtual in the next year or two. The conversations are going to be pretty casual in your meetings. Just like Danielle mentioned for video calls, they're not coming in with a pre-specified set of questions for you. And dress is also casual, so it's not business attire. And the people interviewing generally look put together, though it's still casual. And first and foremost, you should wear something that you feel confident and comfortable in. And most importantly, the interview goes both ways. So we already talked so much about what the admissions committee and the program in general want to find out about you. So let's take a moment to talk about what you are there to find out about them. So it generally falls into 2 themes. Is the lab and program a good fit for your research interests? And will you be happy in this lab, program, university, or town? So future sessions will definitely give you the tools to figure out what to ask based on what your needs are. But to give you some examples of what to consider with regard to research interests, you might think more about what the potential advisor's expertise is, the coursework that would be required that you take in the program or that's offered to in the university, the general research community that you'd have access to. With regard to general happiness, you might think more about the advisor's mentorship style or the financial support you'd receive from the advisor or the program, and the general social community you'd have access to. So this could have to do with your hobbies, or maybe it's important to some of you that somebody of the same, that identifies with the same race, ethnicity, or religion is going to be in this town or program. And once again, we'll talk in the future more about what questions you want to be asking, but here are some tips on how to ask good questions that'll give you informative answers. So first and foremost, you want to be talking to graduate students. You'll be spending a lot of time with them, and they're the only people that know what it's like to go to graduate school in that program. And so they're most likely the ones who have the answers to the questions that you're looking for, and they love when you ask them questions. And if it seems like everyone's focusing on the positives, maybe that means the program is truly perfect, but maybe it's worth trying to reframe your questions a little to get at some of the drawbacks. So saying things like, what's your least favorite thing about, or what would you change about? Or if there's something that you're specifically worried about, you can ask about it. So you could say, has anyone in this program ever gone a semester without funding? And then they have to tell you the real answer.
All right, so now we can talk a little bit about how to prepare for this in-person interview. Remember, as Sivan said, this interview goes both ways. So there's a lot of information that you also want to be finding out, just like Sivan mentioned and outlined in the last slide. So the first thing to do before the interview is read all the websites of the faculty that you will meet with. So this will give you some ideas for questions to ask these faculty members, as many of them may be on the admissions committee. And as we said before, practice talking about yourself and your research interest is really key here. Your mentors at your home institution may be able to help with this by being a sounding board or providing practice interviews for you. We will also be practicing this skill in just a few minutes, or I guess later in the session. And you also want to think of questions to ask the grad students before you come on the trip, including topics such as health insurance, dental insurance, GSR and TA unions, social communities, and other things that will target your life as a grad student at this institution. Okay, and so the last day to decide is for your offer is April 15th, and this is also known as decision day. Okay, so since our last breakout session, we've covered everything in orange. So this was a lot of information. So let's take a minute to just figure out any questions we have, write down something you want to ask on a piece of paper or a sticky note, or and we will go into our second set of breakout rooms. So let's take a moment to think about what questions you might have. Okay, and now we can split out into our breakout rooms. Okay, I think we have everyone back. So hopefully all your questions were answered. If not, we do have a space for asking questions on our website, or you can email your mentor with any additional questions and they could be able to help you with that. Okay, so finally, let's go to our third section, how to talk about your research. So as I'm sure you know by now, it is very important to be comfortable talking about your research interests or experiences when applying to and interviewing for grad school. So while it's not necessary to have your whole dissertation planned, it is important to be able to articulate what topics interest you or what questions you have experience working on. So here are a few things to think about. First, you want to be specific. This can include a study system, scaling, subfield, anything you want to include that is specific to your research interests. So you could say that you want to study animal population genetics, or using genomics, and you basically want to include anything that interests you in a more honed application. You also may want to include questions that you want to ask or are asking. This will help narrow in on what kind of projects you may want to lead in graduate school, and it shows your interviewer that you have an interest in a particular subject or question, which is important for independent graduate work. You also want to practice your elevator pitch. So this is describing who you are, what you've done, and what you're interested in. They are typically informal in context and serve as a quick introduction to you and your research. However, during an interview, it will look a little different. It'll be more detailed in explaining aspects of your interests, and you'll typically talk about your experiences within your research. So this is basically what you will be doing when you are going through for interviews. Okay, so before we begin, let's take a few minutes to jot down any notes for this breakout session, which you will have the opportunity to practice talking about your research. So
actually, sorry to interrupt, but we only have 5 minutes left so it seems like we're not gonna actually be able to do this. So maybe this is something that people can reach out to their individual mentor and ask them to practice and like get feedback from the mentor. Because I don't want to make people stay later if we didn't tell you that you should be doing that.
Okay, that sounds fine.
That sound okay?
So go ahead and email your mentor if you want to work on your elevator pitch. And sorry, we ran a little bit over our time. Hopefully we can, hopefully you will have great talks with your interviewer. And just note that the pitch may change as your interests change and become more focused as you hone in specifically on your interests within your first few years of graduate school.
Also, we went over so much today in just about an hour, and we know that applying to graduate school can be pretty daunting, and maybe you didn't absorb everything that we shared, but remember that these slides and this recording and other resources are online for you to look at. And please do something nice for yourselves as a little congratulations that you're making progress toward figuring out all things grad school. I think especially in grad school, I think it's really nice to celebrate the small steps that you take on the way to bigger milestones. So please do something nice for yourselves.
So thanks so much for listening to our presentation. We have a couple slides before we end today, but first we would appreciate if you could fill out this brief feedback form about this workshop, and we'll give you a few minutes to do this now. Again, this is our first time putting on this workshop, so your input is very important to us. So just, tinyurl.com/EEGradPreview. Okay, let's move on, finish up any sentences you were writing, or you can come back to it later, but thanks so much for filling that out. We really appreciate your feedback. I can't stress that enough. Okay, and so session 3 will be next Tuesday, 8/25, 5 o'clock to 6:15 PST, and it will be on funding and grant writing. So this is not a session to miss. It is very important. Okay, and again, this is just an introduction to all the topics about applying to graduate school and the timeline. If you want to dig deeper into these topics, there are some options. You can chat with your mentor. Please chat with your mentor about your elevator pitches and maybe send them some of the notes and thoughts and pitches that you had. And we will be emailing them to let them know that your elevator pitches are on their way to them, or not yet, but they will be if you choose to. You may also want to visit our website at eegradpreview.weebly.com. And this will be where you can find all of the resources that we've alluded to during the talk. And you can also find the slides there as well. And you can also follow us on Twitter at eegradpreview and on email at eegradpreview@gmail.com if you have any questions or any thoughts. And thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.